Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to try to tackle a subject that I get asked about a lot, just never sort of dove into it, and that is how do you determine if you should get a card graded? And it's a very loaded question, a lot of factors to consider coming in from all angles, very difficult to sort of give a simplified answer to, but that's what I'm going to try to do, break this down into like the simplest formula I can for the sake of this video. I'm going to sort of ignore some of the more complex issues, but for the most part, this is basically the thought process I go through when trying to decide if I should get a card graded from a dealer's perspective, with a financial aspect in mind. Obviously, or if you're a collector, it's a totally different ball game. But the two examples I used here are two cards I specifically chose because I considered them myself for grading. These are two of my cards that I recently considered to PSA, and I'll go through step by step, how I determined if I should send them in to PSA or not. All right, so the first card we're going to look at is a 2010 Topps Buster Posey rookie. This is just his Topps flagship rookie, and we're going to assess whether we should send this card off to PSA. And so the first thing we want to do is obviously sort of determine what we think the grade of the card would be. This card is centered perfectly all around on both the front and the back. Corners and edges are basically perfect everywhere, super sharp. I don't see any issue with any corners or edges or centering. The surface on the front maybe has some really, really light specks here and there. It has like some really light sort of smudges, you could say, along the border, but on the top of both the back and the front border, and some other very, very, very minor things like that. Now, PSA may overlook these things and not even consider them, but I would say that they're more likely to see them and grade this card as a 9, a mint 9. Long shot that they overlook them and give it a 10. I think a 9 is the most likely grade for this card to receive. There's also a small chance it could receive something less, an 8. And if you were to make me guess between an 8 or a 10, I would guess an 8 over a 10, but I think both 8 and 10 are actually fairly unlikely. I think this card is a pretty strong candidate to get a PSA mint 9. All right, the second thing we need to do is a step that probably a lot of people sort of overlook or don't consider, and that is we need to determine the value of the card raw. And when I say the value of the card, I mean what would we be able to sell it for raw? And there's many ways to sort of calculate this. You can go to eBay, look at completed sales. For a card like this, I personally would go to CUMC and see what they're priced at. This is because it's a very common card. There's going to be lots of them available on CUMC. That's sort of a good gauge as to what it could sell for. And also, if I were to sell this raw myself, I would just send it to CUMC. So that's sort of how I would be able to sell it, or that's the plan that I would make in terms of selling it. So what would I expect to sell it for if I sold it raw? And you can see there's 24 copies of the card on CUMC at the moment. Those are 24 ungraded copies without some sort of condition issue. And they range, looks like the lowest is $12.75, and they range up to pretty high, up to $100. But realistically, this is listed mostly in the $15 to $20 range. And like I said, the lowest is $12.75. So, if I sent this to CUMC, I'd probably price it at like $15 and, accept offers down to $12 or something like that, let's say. So I'm going to say that the value of this card raw, meaning what I would expect to sell it for, is $12. And now we need to determine what the card will sell for once graded. I'm going to use vintagecardprices.com for, to sort of look at the data, but you can use eBay completed sales or any number of pricing tools out there. So here on a PSA 9, we can see 6 recent sales, basically all in the $60 to $90 range. There was a recent one for $44, which is a little unnerving, but for the most part, they're sort of $60 to $90, and the overall average is $78. So we're going to call the value of a PSA 9 $78, and that's basically what I would expect to sell it for if it's in a PSA 9 holder. Do the same thing with the 8s. 8s, looking around here, it looks like $42 is the average. Pretty wide range, 20 up to 51, but 42 is the average. We'll go with 42 as, again, that's what I would expect to get for it if I were to have it in a PSA 8 holder. And then a PSA 10s, mostly around 200. It looks like they range down from 180 up to about 230 with an overall average of $203. So we're going to call that the value, the price that I would expect to sell it for in a PSA 10 holder if we get lucky there. All right, so let's put all this on one chart. And trust me, I don't make a chart for every card I'm trying to I'm considering for grading, but this is just the thought process put down on paper here. So on the left is what you're giving up, and you have to remember you are giving up the card raw, which we've determined is a $12 value. You will no longer have that $12 card anymore once you've sent it into grading. You're also obviously paying for a grading fee. In this case, PSA is $30 at the moment. But realistically, when you go with any of the grading companies, there's going to be shipping and insurance costs on both ends. It can be, how much it is depends really on how big an order you send in, but we'll say 10% in this case. So you're really going to be paying out of pocket more like $33, which means you're giving up $33 cash and a $12 card $45 in total. On the right is obviously what we would expect the card to be worth once we have it. And like I said, PSA 9 is our most likely guess, and in that case, it's a $78 card, which would mean we're up $33 if it grades a PSA 9. If it's a PSA 8, we're more or less breaking even, right? I mean, down a little bit, down $3, but not a big deal. And if it's a PSA 10, which again is a very, very long shot, but that would be a nice profit on there. So if you look at this overall, I would say this card is worth grading. I mean, at a PSA 9 is our best guess. We're up $30. The downside is almost nothing. Worst case scenario, we're basically breaking even or losing a few dollars. And I'm a big believer in limiting downside. You don't want to have big losses if you're doing this for any sort of living. So I like the fact that there's almost no downside, and then there's some long shot upside, which would, of course, always be nice. But most likely scenario, we're going to be up $30 if we send this into PSA. And I put those two notes at the bottom, and they're very important things to be aware of. Although for this card, they didn't really play a factor. But the potential volatility of a card is a big one to be aware of. It's especially the case with hot young prospects or young players. Their card values can just go up and down very, very, very quickly. And if PSA here at the $30 level has a 4-month turnaround time, so the prices you put on this chart might be completely off by the time you get the card back. And that's just something to be aware of. It's also the case, like, if you could send in cards during the season, 4 months later you get the card back, the season's long over, and just in general, card values of that in that sport have sort of cooled, and that's something to be aware of as well. And you can go the reverse way, send things in during the off season and expect it to maybe have a slight bump if you get it back during the season. But with this Buster Posey card, I mean, there's really very little volatility here. I mean, he's retired now. He's a long-established, popular star veteran player in the league. It's pretty unlikely that this card would have some sort of huge drop over the next 4 months. So I would sort of say the volatility risk on this particular card is minimal. And then the easy to sell thing, there'll occasionally be cards that have a particular value but are just really hard to move. This is not one of those cards. So again, not something to be worried about with this card. But that's it for the assessment of the Buster Posey Topps rookie here. Whether we should send it to PSA. My assessment was that this is a card worth sending to PSA, and I did. It's been sent off to PSA. It is there now being graded. All right, let's check out another example. 1996 Skybox EX2000 Kobe Bryant rookie. I think this is probably my favorite of Kobe Bryant's rookie cards. Nice looking card. But yeah, another one here that I considered to send off to PSA. So first thing we do is take a look and see what we think the card would grade. Well, you can notice that the card is off-centered, left to right. More noticeable on the front, well, actually on the back as well. You can see it's probably 65-35 centering, 60-40 maybe, something like that, but definitely a bit off-centered. It also has a corner on the front that is a bit of a ding in the lower left, and in the back, a corner in the upper left, a bit of a ding. That's going to hurt the card's grade. There's some very, very, very light chipping along the edges throughout. It's very, very minor, but it is there, and will definitely get picked up by the PSA graders. Other than that, that looks to be sort of the only flaws with the card. So if you sort of factor all that in, certainly no chance at a 10, certainly no chance at a 9. There's just too many little issues going on. I would say the card is most likely going to be a 7, has a long shot at an 8, and 6 is more likely than an 8. So I would say a 7 is the most likely grade, with 6 being the second most likely grade. And again, if we happen to get a grader who's just feeling ultra generous, we may pull off the 8. All right, so now to determine what the card's value is raw, ungraded here. And I checked COMC, but there weren't very many copies on there. There was only 2, and they were priced really high. So I'm going to assume that eBay is a better place to go here to sort of determine current market value. These here you're looking at are the 8 last sales of the card raw. All of these listings state the card is sort of near mint or in that sort of range. You can see they're all right around $200. There was one really high one at $400. I'm gonna throw that one out as an outlier down in the lower middle there, $399.99. That was a buy it now, and I think that was probably an outlier. Maybe it was described as ultra high grade or something, but for the most part, the raw ones are all right around $200. So I'm gonna say this card would sell for around $200 raw. That would be my best guess. All right, in a PSA 7, we're looking at the last 6 sales, and the average of the last 6 sales is $233. Pretty consistent, only ranging from about $213 up to $241. So yeah, $233 is what a PSA 7 would sell for. A PSA 8, if we were to get lucky, is a lot more, close to $400 for a PSA 8. and a PSA 6 down around 172. And actually, the last sort of been on the last few sales are even less than that. So $172 is what we'll say here as the average of recent PSA 6 sales. So putting all that onto the chart here, we are giving up, remember on the left side, a $200 raw value card and $33 in grading fees for a total of $233. On the right, our best guess is a PSA 7, and that would be a $233 card. So that's a break even. Our best guess is if we sent this in for grading, we would break even. In a 6, it would be about a $60 loss or so. And you can see in an 8, that would be a nice $160 plus. But remember, PSA 8 is very, very unlikely. So looking this over, I would say this card is not worth getting graded. You're most likely going to be breaking even. You're going to have to wait 4 months just to break even. And you know, the odds of any sort of upside are very, very small and not worth it. And there's even some downside where you could be out $60. Not worth a 4-month wait when you can basically just sell this now as is for $200. So yeah, overall assessment was this card was not worth getting graded. I'll simply sell it myself, send it to CUMC or send it to Hoodies, or maybe post it on eBay and just sell it as is. But that's it. Thank you everyone for watching. I actually had a lot of fun making this video for whatever reason. Not really sure why, but it was just sort of a randomly fun one to make. If people really enjoy this, I could do more of these examples, maybe some vintage and some ultra modern or some, really, really rare cards. So the formula is maybe a little more complicated, but yeah, just let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that, or if you have any questions about either of these two cards and why I came to the conclusions I came to. But appreciate it again, and see you all again real soon. Thanks everyone.